With the right budget, filmmakers can bring virtually any shot to life on screen. The most expensive films of all time cost more to produce than many films can make at the box office. Sometimes these investments pay off. In other cases, they disappoint the filmmaker and the studio. The bigger the budget, the more that's at stake. While many directors never have to worry about films costing over a few million, there are some who regularly operate in the area of $200 million. It begs the question, what is the most expensive movie ever made? So in this video of infomakerify, we've adjusted the budgets of various movies over the years for inflation to give you this list of the biggest budget movies, all leading up to the most expensive movie ever made. 25. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. This won't be the only entry the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise will have on this list. But it does hold the distinction of being the lowest grossing film in the series domestically. It's no wonder the 2017 movie effectively stalled development on a prospective sixth film. The original budget of this film costs about $230 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $248 million. But it earned about $750 to $809 million from the box office. 24. Spectre. Internal memos leaked during the Sony hack revealed the budget for Spectre was originally going to be a lot more. However, the forces that managed to get it were reduced to the mid-200s after rebates. That being said, it's still a rich-looking movie where you can tell that most of their formative budget actually did make it on screen, which is not always the case. The original budget of this film costs about $245 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $272 million. But it earned about $881 to $997 million from the box office. 23. Captain America: Civil War. It's interesting to think of the movie Captain America: Civil War would be if Spider-Man hadn't ended up being part of it. There was a working version of the script without Spidey's involvement, but as it stands, the film ended up giving the webhead the perfect introduction to the MCU. He's a fully formed hero, allowing Spider-Man: Homecoming to gloss over the elements of his origin story that had already been told to death on screen. The original budget of this film costs about $230 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $253 million. But it earned about $1,153 to $1,269 million from the box office. 22. The Dark Knight Rises. Expectations were high for The Dark Knight Rises coming off the immense critical and commercial success of The Dark Knight. After Heath Ledger's Joker, the sequel needed to somehow up the ante, and it accomplished precisely that with a larger budget and wider scope. For most people, the film failed to surpass its predecessor, but that was certainly a tall order. And it did make its money back and then some. The original budget of this film costs about $230 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $265 million. But it earned about $1,081 to $1,247 million from the box office. 21. Avatar. Given the advancements in movie-making technology Avatar helped usher in, it's astonishing the film isn't higher up on this list. At the time it came out, it actually was the most expensive movie ever made, but thanks to the advent of major blockbusters and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, its title soon fell. The original budget of this film costs about $237 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $293 million. But it earned about $2,847 to $3,547 million from the box office. 20. No Time to Die. It's only appropriate for the next James Bond installment to top the previous, but the true cost of No Time to Die is under dispute. While it's been reported the budget came in at less than $250 million, Variety reported that it could be as high as $300 million due to delays as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The film earned about $730 million from the box office. 19. The Fate of the Furious. Earned about $1239 to $1336 million from the box office. 18. Furious 7. 17. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is the most expensive film made in the Harry Potter series. The reason for this can be attributed to two factors. 1. The actors had been around long enough to negotiate strong contracts. 2. The film heavily relied on CGI, which gets expensive quickly. The original budget of this film costs about $250 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $310 million. But it earned about $934 to $1,157 million from the box office. 16. Beauty and the Beast. Disney has recently gotten in the business of remaking all of its beloved animated classics into the realm of live action. However, animation seems downright affordable when looking at the cost of some of these movies, especially Beauty and the Beast, which was produced for $255 million during production in Europe. The original budget of this film costs about $255 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $275 million. But it earned about $1,264 to $1,363 million from the box office. 15. Spider-Man 3. The original budget of this film costs about $258 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $333 million. But it earned about $895 to $1,155 million from the box office. 14. Star Wars: The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens was less reliant on CGI than the prequels. As such, it utilized more real sets and props. So why was it over twice the budget? As it turns out, filming in real locations isn't always necessarily cheaper than using a green screen. The original budget of this film costs about $249 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $287 million. But it earned about $2,066 to $2,291 million from the box office. 13. The Lion King. 2019's The Lion King is a good example of how marketing can greatly alter the overall cost of making a film. For instance, the film cost roughly $260 million to make. But reports indicate that with marketing, the true cost of the film was closer to $400 million. At least it more than made up for the cost with a stellar box office run. The film earned about $1,663 to $1,724 million from the box office. 12. Tangled. It may seem weird that a Disney retelling of Rapunzel would cost so much. However, the high budget can be attributed to the film's combination of hand-drawn animation and CGI. Production also stopped and started repeatedly before the finished product could get underway. The original budget of this film costs about $216 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $314 million. But it earned about $592 to $714 million from the box office. 11. Star Wars: The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi had won dubious distinction at the box office. It was the first big-budget blockbuster since 2013 to net less than $50 million at the China box office. And even though it has become one of the most divisive entries in the Skywalker legacy, it didn't stop people from seeing it. The original budget of this film costs about $262 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $282 million. But it earned about $1,333 to $1,438 million from the box box office. 10. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Film Law estimated the budget for Batman v Superman was around $263 million after tax incentives. It's a feat director Zack Snyder would top for his follow-up effort, Justice League. The original budget of this film costs about $263 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $290 million. But it earned about $872 to $960 million from the box office. 9. John Carter. John Carter is an infamous Hollywood cautionary tale. It's one of the biggest bombs in box office history, and it's interesting to consider all of the factors that led to it tanking. Part of this can be attributed to Disney's lackluster efforts to adequately market the film. The original budget of this film costs about $264 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $305 million. But it only earned about $284 to $328 million from the box office. 8. Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker was by no means a flop, but by Disney's standards for a Star Wars film, it underperformed. Many believe the reason for this to be an oversaturation of Star Wars movies. With a franchise as big as Star Wars, you're almost guaranteed to see a profit, even after spending almost $300 million. The original budget of this film costs about $275 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $285 million. But it earned about $1,078 to $1,118 million from the box office. 7. Solo: A Star Wars Story. It may sound off to hear that a spin-off is technically the most expensive Star Wars movie ever made. However, the film had a tumultuous time behind the scenes. It switched directors partway through production and underwent extensive reshoots. The original budget of this film costs about $275 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $295 million. But it earned about $393 to $415 million from the box office. 6. Justice League. Prior to the Snyder Cut, Justice League faced many of the same problems behind the scenes as Solo. There was a director change, and the film received numerous reshoots and added scenes. The theatrical cut was lambasted upon release only to get reborn under Snyder's original vision. The original budget of this film cost about $300 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $324 million. But it earned about $658 to $710 million from the box office. Before the final top 5 most expensive movies, smash that beautiful red subscribe button and give us a good thumbs up. All done? Good. Let's move on. 5. Pirates of the Caribbean: At World's End. At World's End had all the usual suspects when it comes to big-budget tentpole features. There was extensive VFX as well as shooting on location. However, there was also the matter of rising star costs to pay for the likes of Johnny Depp and Orlando Bloom to star in the picture. The original budget of this film cost about $300 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $387 million. But it earned about $961 to $1,240 million from the box office. 4. Avengers: Infinity War. It was the most ambitious crossover of all time. Signing all of those big-name stars, who at that point had starred in several money-making blockbusters, couldn't have been cheap. At this point, it was a culmination of all the Marvel movies up to that point, so you know they had to go big or go home. The original budget of this film cost about $325 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $343 million. But it earned about $2,048 to $2,164 million from the box office. 3. Avengers: Endgame. Avengers: Endgame cost $350 million to make. Astonishingly, $75 million of that went to Robert Downey Jr., who was able to amass incredible negotiating power since his time in the original Iron Man in 2008. He made a measly $500,000 for that movie. The original budget of this film cost about $350 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $363 million. But it earned about $2,798 to $2,900 million from the box office. 2. Avengers: Age of Ultron. There's some dispute as to the true cost of Age of Ultron. Some sources list its budget closer to $250 million, but Forbes published a report that put it over $400 million, which was of course offset by subsidies. The estimated budget of this film cost about $365 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $405 million. But it earned about $1,403 to $1,556 million from the box office. 1. Pirates of the Caribbean, On Stranger Tides. On Stranger Tides is the most expensive film ever made. How can that be? You might ask. First, the movie was shot using expensive 3D cameras. Secondly, many of the scenes were shot at sea, which many major film productions can attest is exceptionally costly. Not only that, the franchise had been red hot since its inception, so a huge budget was a calculated risk. The estimated budget of this film cost about $379 million. But due to inflation, budget adjusted to $450 million. But it earned about $1,046 to $1,243 million from the box office. So that's for today's video. Which movie in this list you like the most? Leave a comment below. If you liked this video, then give us a good thumbs up. This is infomakerify, and I will catch you in the next one.